Let's get into today's episode of Why We Succeed.
Like I said, I like your transparency because so many people get caught up in the numbers, right? Or they get caught up in all of these major milestones. And not only you, but other guests that I've had on the podcast, they share the same thing. I very, very seldom do you hear people say, oh man, success was when, I made $10 million while I was sleeping in Maui,
like our man Biggie once said, more money, more problems.
More problems. That's facts. That is facts. Yo, it is. It is. And that's the one thing that most people who have yet to, quote unquote, attain the perception of success, because I think that's really all it is. It's like the Matrix. It's perceived success. But when you take that red pill and you see what it really looks like, then you're like, oh man, it's kind of ugly over here.
Seriously. And I think even when you make that money, and you make it faster than what you planned, your systems and your foundation aren't set up to handle that. So while you have short-term success, we think about like SoundCloud rappers, right? Or like rappers on TikTok who are blowing up. They're having these really quick, short-term successes. They're kind of like the new version of a one-hit wonder, right? And so it's like you blew up so fast, you made so much money so fast. Well, how do you sustain that? How do you continue that trajectory? And that's why I think I have a huge problem. I'm getting better at it, but I do the comparison game a lot, and I blame social media for that. But I also sit with myself and go, well, how long have they actually been in business? Because we're seeing their success, and it's probably been 6 or 7 years, and we're comparing them at the 2 to 3 year mark, right? And so I really try to sit and look at what I'm doing and see that long-term trajectory so it can be sustainable. And that's something I think that's really, really important that a lot of people overlook sometimes. And you got to figure out how you continue that long-term success.
I agree. Now, you mentioned earlier that you've been on your own pretty much since 17. And I'm curious, how have you been able to navigate? You are very wise, not just from an individual perspective, but from a business perspective, right? You talk about how important it is to be financially literate. And I'm curious, where did you pick up all of these skill sets, all of these things that you needed to be able to be where you are today? Because a lot of people don't have the ability to do it or go at it alone. Were there people that came along that helped you along your journey? What did that process look like from 17 to now?
Yeah, not to be a little negative Nancy again, but I really think I don't even know how to answer this, because in the sense that I never had someone that I could ask $20 for. Like, ever. I never had somebody that I could be like, oh my God, I can't afford a tank of gas. Like, can I borrow $20 from you? I never had that experience. I never had that support system. And so I think for me, being forced into like a survive versus thrive, feast versus famine space, you learn to do absolutely anything that you need to do and everything you can do in order to make your life the way that you need it, right? And so I'm sure people listening are going to be like, oh, everything was mapped out for her. I still have no fucking clue what I did. And it's like, yeah, it's nice to have money in the bank, but like I look back and it's like, I went to undergrad because that's what I thought I had to do. I worked full time. I was working 50-hour weeks and taking 7 classes a semester.
Wow.
My entire undergrad. Like, when I tell y'all, like, I did absolutely every single thing that I could in order to sustain this, like, independence, right? So I think growing up in the environment, in the really abusive environment that I grew up in, not only domestic abuse, but sexual and emotional, is when I got out of that, and when I finally came out about my abuse, I never wanted to be in that situation again. I still can't even, like, when I go home to Ohio, I can't even walk in that house. Like, my stepmom and my siblings still live there. I can't even go inside, right? Because it mentally puts you in this space of where you were during that trauma. And so I did absolutely everything that I could, and I still do, right? Like, I talked about driving Uber. I am not some like too good to do anything, right? Like I will drive Uber. I will go back and work in retail if I have to. Like I will do whatever absolutely I need to do in order to make that happen. Now, I think from a learning perspective, I'm really fortunate that I've always been a reader and that I am a sponge. I love learning things. And so I've read a lot of books. I devour, not only listen, but like devour business podcasts, you know? I think part of that too is, and I say this with as much love as I can, but I think the female space within entrepreneurship is incredibly toxic. And I think that they put these boundaries and these barriers on things because you're a woman and you need to be, you know, you need to be pink. Like I hate all of that. And so I was reading Gary Vaynerchuk. I was reading, I've met Michael and Susan Dell many times working in the nonprofit space. I was reading his books. I was asking questions to people who are more successful. There were people on our board at our nonprofit that are still my mentors today that also own their businesses. And they're men. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's something that I think I broke through that I don't think a lot of people have the confidence to do or know how to do, especially as a woman in this space, is you want to listen to every woman and cut every man out. And I just think that's just bullshit because there's a reason why companies in the corporate space are so successful. And when you're like, I never want to be near corporate, I don't ever, there's a reason their companies are successful is because of the processes they have. And so I was devouring all of that and I still do. And so I think that it's really interesting, like to think about that question because I don't know. I just I never wanted to be where I was 10 years ago. You know, I never want to be there ever again. So, and if that means that I got to eat ramen for a couple of days, then
ramen it is, man. Because you chefing in the kitchen anyway. Yeah. So like, you know what I can do with ramen? Exactly.
And I think for me too, because I come from a space where I never had anything growing up. Like I had Skechers. I was never allowed to have like nice shoes. I was never allowed to have any like brand things. I didn't have my first iPhone until I was like 25. No, like 24. I didn't have an iPod. I had an off-brand MP3 player. Like, you know, so for me, I'm not a big spender either. Yeah. You know, and so for me, like I think that also is a huge benefit is I don't have a high cost life. But yes, I live in Austin and it's really expensive to live here. But like I don't shop constantly. I don't do all those things. So it's really easy to be able to not have to have that pressure while you're learning and growing to sustain a life that you had before.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Why We Succeed. If you value relationships and believe they are the true key to success, be sure to subscribe. To watch this full discussion and gain access to exclusive content, join our Patreon today. The link is in the description. Thank you, and we'll catch you on the next episode.